This temple should not exist, not in the way it does, not in the way it was made. Imagine standing in front of a mountain, and instead of building something on it, someone carved an entire temple out of it, not piece by piece, not brick by brick, but by removing everything that was not the temple, every wall, every pillar, every statue, all of it revealed from a single solid rock. And the most unsettling part is this: no one can fully explain how it was done. Far from the noise of modern cities, there stands a place that feels frozen in time, a place where stone speaks louder than history books. The Kailasa temple rises from the earth, not as a structure built by human hands, but as something uncovered, as if it had always been there waiting to be revealed. When you first see it, your mind struggles to process what your eyes are telling you. This is not construction. This is something else, something far more precise, far more intentional, and far more mysterious. It is said that this temple was created over 1,000 years ago, during a time when tools were simple, when technology was limited, when human effort was the only force that could shape the world. But when you look closer at the temple, those explanations begin to fall apart, because what stands here is not just impressive, it is nearly impossible. The story begins with a king, a ruler who wanted to create something that would stand forever, a monument to power, to faith, to greatness. But instead of building upward like every civilization before him, he chose something unthinkable. He ordered his workers to carve downward into a mountain, to start at the top and slowly reveal a temple hidden within the rock itself. This decision alone changes everything, because carving downward means there is no room for mistakes, no chance to fix errors, no way to rebuild what has been broken. Every move must be perfect from the very first strike. Think about that. Imagine sculpting a masterpiece without ever seeing the full picture. Imagine removing thousands of tons of rock while holding a vision in your mind that cannot be tested or corrected. One wrong cut could destroy everything, and yet somehow they succeeded. As the work began, the scale of the task became overwhelming. This was not a small structure. This was an entire complex. Massive courtyards, towering pillars, detailed sculptures, all carved from one continuous piece of stone. Experts today estimate that over 400,000 tons of rock were removed to create it. That number alone is difficult to comprehend, but when you break it down, it becomes even more unbelievable. If the temple was completed in around 20 years, as many believe, that means workers had to remove an enormous amount of rock every single day. Day after day, without pause, without error, without modern tools, without machines, without anything we would consider advanced. Just basic instruments, simple chisels, hammer strikes echoing through the stone. And yet the result is something so precise that even today engineers struggle to understand it. As you walk through the temple, you begin to notice the details. The carvings are not rough or uneven. They are smooth, delicate, almost alive. Faces emerge from the stone with expressions that feel real. Patterns flow across the walls with perfect symmetry. Pillars rise with exact proportions. Nothing feels random. Nothing feels accidental. Everything has purpose. Everything fits together like a puzzle that was solved long before it was ever created. This is where the mystery deepens, because precision like this requires planning. It requires measurement. It requires knowledge of geometry and structure. But there are no records that explain how this knowledge was applied. No detailed instructions. No surviving blueprints. Just the temple itself, standing as the only evidence that it was ever done. And then there is the method. The fact that it was carved from the top down changes everything. It means the builders had to know exactly what they were doing before they even began. They had to see the entire temple in their minds. Every detail, every dimension, every angle, before a single piece of rock was removed. That level of foresight is almost unimaginable. Even with modern technology, we rely on models and simulations. We test. We adjust, we correct. But here there was none of that, just vision and execution. As time passed, the temple took shape, slowly revealing itself from the mountain. Layer by layer, detail by detail. Until what remained was not just a building, but a masterpiece. A structure that feels less like something made by humans and more like something discovered. As if the mountain itself held the temple within it, waiting for someone to bring it into the light. But questions began to emerge, questions that could not be easily answered. How did they remove so much rock so quickly? How did they maintain such precision without modern tools? How did they ensure structural stability while carving away the very material that supported it? These are not simple questions, and the answers are not simple either. Some believe that the builders possessed techniques that have been lost over time, knowledge passed down through generations that eventually disappeared. Others suggest that the timeline we accept may not be accurate, that the temple could have taken much longer to create than we think. But even these explanations leave gaps. Even they fail to fully account for the level of detail and precision that exists. And then there are the more unsettling theories, the ones that challenge everything we believe about history. The idea that ancient civilizations may have had access to knowledge or technology that we no longer understand. That what we see as primitive may not have been so limited after all. These ideas are often dismissed. But when faced with something like this temple, it becomes harder to ignore them completely. Because the truth is this: we have not been able to replicate it, not even close. With all our machines, with all our technology, with all our advancements, we have not created anything quite like this. Not in the same way, not with the same method, not with the same result. And that raises a question that is difficult to answer. If we cannot do it now, how was it done then? As you stand within the temple, you begin to feel something else, something beyond the physical structure, a sense of presence, of history, of something greater than the stone itself. Walls seem to hold memories. It is a place you experience, and that experience leaves you with a feeling you cannot easily explain. A mix of awe and curiosity, of admiration and uncertainty, because the more you look, the more you realize how much you do not know. How many questions remain unanswered? How much of the story is still hidden? Maybe the temple is not just a monument, maybe it is a message. A reminder that history is not as simple as we think, that there are chapters we have lost, knowledge we have forgotten, mysteries we have yet to understand. Or maybe the truth is even more unsettling. Maybe what we see here is evidence that our understanding of the past is incomplete. That there were moments in history where humans achieved things we cannot fully explain, and that those moments have been buried, forgotten, or ignored. Forgotten, or ignored. Whatever the truth may be, the temple stands as a challenge. A silent question carved into stone, asking us to look deeper, to think harder, to question what we believe. Because sometimes the greatest mysteries are not hidden in darkness. Sometimes they stand right in front of us, waiting to be understood. Something about this place feels wrong the moment you begin to understand it. Not visually, not at first. Because what you see is beautiful. Massive stone rising in perfect form, carved with breathtaking detail. But then your mind catches up and asks a simple question that refuses to go away. How is this even possible? And that is where the mystery begins to take hold. You are looking at a temple that was not built, but revealed. A structure carved from a single rock by removing everything that was not part of the design. Not added piece by piece, but taken away with absolute precision. Every pillar, every statue, every wall, all collected, all part of one continuous mass of stone. And yet no one can fully explain how it was done. Not with certainty, not with proof. Just theories that feel incomplete the deeper you look. The conflict begins with time, because the commonly accepted belief is that this temple was completed in less than 2 decades. Around 20 years to carve an entire complex out of solid rock. At first that sounds impressive, But when you break it down, it becomes something else entirely, something impossible. Hundreds of thousands of tons of rock would have had to be removed. That means day after day, workers would need to cut through stone at a speed that does not match the tools they supposedly had. No machines, no advanced cutting equipment, just basic tools striking against one of the hardest materials on Earth. And yet the structure is not rough, it is not uneven, it is flawless. This is where the conflict deepens, because if the timeline is true, then the tools do not make sense. And if the tools are accurate, then the timeline cannot be. One of them has to be wrong. But history offers no clear correction, just silence, just gaps where explanations should be. And in those gaps, the mystery grows stronger. As you move through the temple, the feeling intensifies. You notice the symmetry, the balance, the way everything aligns with a level of precision that suggests careful planning far beyond what should have been possible at the time. This was not guesswork. This was not trial and error. This was execution of a vision that had to be complete before the first cut was ever made, because there was no room for mistakes. Carving from the top down means every decision is final. You cannot rebuild what you remove. You cannot fix what you destroy. And yet there are no visible errors, no signs of collapse, no evidence of failure. So the question becomes more disturbing. Not just how was it done, but who truly understood how to do it. Because this was not just labor, this was knowledge. Deep understanding of structure, geometry, and material. Knowledge that seems too advanced for the time it supposedly existed in. And that is where the shocking truth begins to surface. There are no detailed records explaining the process. No step-by-step accounts. No surviving manuals or instructions. Just the finished result standing in silent defiance of everything we expect from that period in history. It is as if the 4E method was either lost completely or never meant to be shared. As if the knowledge existed for a moment and then vanished, leaving behind only the evidence that it once did. Some researchers suggest that the builders may have used techniques that we no longer understand. Methods passed down through generations and then forgotten. Others believe the timeline may be wrong and that the temple took far longer to create than we think. But even these explanations struggle to account for the sheer scale and precision involved. Because extending the timeline does not fully solve the problem of how such perfect execution was achieved without modern tools. And then there is another possibility, one that many are hesitant to consider but cannot fully dismiss. That the people who created this temple had access to knowledge or technology that we do not recognize today. Not necessarily advanced in the way we define it, but advanced in a different sense, a different approach to shaping stone, a different understanding of materials, something that allowed them to achieve results that feel impossible to us now. This is where the story begins to take a darker turn. Because if that knowledge once existed, then the question is not just how it was used, but why it disappeared, why it was not preserved, why it was not passed down in a way that we can still access. Knowledge that powerful does not simply vanish without reason. It is either lost through time or removed intentionally. And both possibilities are unsettling. As you explore deeper into the temple, you begin to feel something else, something beyond the physical structure, a sense of weight, not just from the stone, but from the history it carries. The carvings seem to watch. The silence feels heavy. There is a presence here that is difficult to explain. Not supernatural in a dramatic sense, but something quieter, something that Mac. As you are aware of how little you truly understand about what you are seeing, the dark side of this story is not about horror in the traditional sense. It is about realization. The realization that our understanding of the past may be incomplete, that there are achievements we cannot fully explain, that there are chapters missing from the story of human history, and that this temple might be one of the few pieces of evidence left behind. There are whispers of hidden chambers, of areas that have not been fully explored, of carvings that hold meanings we have yet to decode. These ideas are difficult to verify, but they persist because the temple itself invites them. It feels like more than just a place of worship. It feels like something layered, something designed with intention beyond what is immediately visible. And then comes the moment that changes everything. The point where admiration turns into something deeper. When you realize that even with all our modern technology, we have not recreated anything quite like this. Not in the same way, not with the same method. We can build higher, we can build faster, but we cannot carve an entire complex from a single rock with this level of precision and confidence, not without relying on processes that are completely different from what was used here. That is the climax of this mystery. The understanding that what stands before us is not just a relic of the past, but a challenge to the present. A question directed at everything we believe about progress and capability. Because if we cannot do this now, then how was it done then? And if it was done, then what does that say about what we have lost along the way? The temple does not answer these questions, it simply exists. Silent, unchanging, holding its secrets within the stone. And that silence is what makes it so powerful, because it forces you to confront the unknown, to act. Except that there are things we do not fully understand, and that some of those things may remain unexplained for a very long time. As you step back and look at the temple, one last time you begin to see it differently. Not just as a masterpiece of architecture, but as a reminder. A reminder that history is not as clear as we often believe, that there are mysteries hidden in plain sight, that there are achievements we have yet to fully comprehend. And maybe that is the most important part of this story. Not finding a final answer, but continuing to ask the question, to stay curious, to explore the unknown. Because it is in those questions that we move closer to understanding not just the past, but ourselves. If this story made you pause even for a moment, if it made you question what you thought you knew, then do not let that feeling fade. Share your thoughts, your theories, what you think really happened here. Was this the result of human effort alone, or is there something more to the story that we have yet to uncover? Because the more we ask, the closer we get to the truth. And sometimes the truth is far more incredible than anything we could imagine.